Hello, ASIJ. This is Mr. Waka in the math department. I'm here today to talk to you about grading in general. Each department's going to be a little different how they do things specifically, but at the same time, there are some commonalities. And me as a math teacher, I want to run you through the different types of averages there are out there, and mostly why most of those don't work for every situation. So then that will lead you into a conversation with your teacher about what does work in your particular class. So here we go. Make sure you run through this kind of thing, and talk about it with your teacher. Be open, and hopefully you can better understand what's going on. So the first thing I want to say is that discussions from teacher to student really should be about your work. Whatever evaluation you've done, whether it's a paper or a test or whatever you're doing, and that's going to be put into your grades and be calculated as a major, should be where the conversation is about what you deserve as a grade. It shouldn't be at the end of the year, the semester, about I'm just not happy with my grades, give me a better grade. It should be, the conversation should always be about the proficiencies that ASIJ has set up for us. So this is what we use in the math department, but it's very, very, very similar in all the other departments, I'm sure. So what are the different averages we could do as a teacher if we wanted? We could use the median, which, if you remember, that kind of lists out all the data or all the grades in order, and then it just goes right in the middle of them. We have the mean, which is what everybody thinks of as the average. That's normal average, where every single data point has weight. We have the mode, which is the most. Like if you have 4 B's and you have a couple P's and a couple PH's or something, because you had 4 B's, that's the most, so you're going to get that B, so right away I can kind of eliminate the mode and say, like, the mode is not a good indicator of average in our situation. So the mode is not a good one. Now I could do something like truncated. That's like the Olympics, where they take the lowest score and the highest score and they drop them, and then they use the grades in the middle. I don't think for most classes that really makes sense. We don't really want to be dropping grades, right? So these two really don't make sense to us. I do want to talk about the median and the mean, however. We want to say, like, okay, which of those is better? Well, let's take a good look and then we can talk about it. So this slide right here is talking about the median, and it's trying to show you why certain situations the median is not a good indicator of who you are. So look at these grades listed out. I got 3 examples here. And you'll see that the first one has a bunch of AH's, but it has a couple B's, right? And then the second one has some B's and it has an E. And then the third one, even though they have AH's as well, they have some extra PH's in there, right? So we have approaching highs and beginnings and exemplary and proficient highs. So anyway, if you were using the median just lines them up, looks at the center and says, what do you get? And in each of these cases, because you have 4 AH's and you only have 3 of the other grades, no matter how you line this up, the AH is always going to be the median. So you can see here that AH is the median of all these three sets. Now, if you're the student and you're student number 1 and somebody else is student number 3, that's probably not going to seem very fair to you, right? Like, why should you all be getting the same grade when, this person has 3 B's and this person has 3 PH's? So this is a good example of, like, maybe why the median is not a good example, a good way to calculate your grade. So we don't use it strictly just using the median by itself is not really a good idea. Okay, let's look at the mean. So the mean is, like I said, the average that takes every data point into consideration. So you have 3 B, these are the same grades that we just looked at, right? Now, when you do the mean of those, the mean is going to take into account that these are B's, and it's going to take into account that these are PH's. So it's going to weigh those as the same as the other ones, of course, but you're going to have some weight there. So you can see the person that had those extra B's drops down to an A for the mean, and the person who has those PH's is going to be raised up to a P. Now you might be thinking, well, that's great. That sounds like we want it, what we want it to do. And you're probably right. The mean might work in these kind of situations. But let's look at these situations down below. What if you had someone who had a whole bunch of P's, and then at the end of the year they bomb their last test and get a B? and or someone has a bunch of A's and they do really well on their last test and get an E. Well, according to the mean, these grades would be equal. So this person who had a whole bunch of P's would end up with an AH, and the person who had all these A's is going to also end up with an AH. Now the AH person might be happy, but the person who had all those P's is probably not going to be happy. So we can see that that's not probably a good indicator. So the mean isn't a good indicator for these types of situations. So where are we at? It's like, well, the mean kind of works sometimes, and the median kind of works for these situations, right? So the mean works for these, the median works for these. So what do we do, right? What's the teacher to do? This is kind of what it boils down to. And I think this is the image that I personally would like students to kind of walk away with in their mind, like, because it kind of shows where the conversations have been about, where are you and what's fair for you when we look at grades at the end of the semester or the year. So this is statistically how things work. You are either one of these three students normally. Like either all your grades are pretty much the same, straight across the board. So then when we calculate your grade or we look at your grades and we determine who you are, it's pretty easy because they're all pretty much the same. So we don't really have to, think about it too much. That's just who you are. You got a whole bunch of P's the whole year long, and that's just who you are. Now, this could be the student over here on the left is where they have maybe mostly one type of grade, but then they have one or two lower grades somewhere in their distribution. So the mean is going to get pulled down from the median. So your median might be kind of closer to where all your grades were, but then the mean is going to be affected by those outliers. And in this case, on the left, that's because you had a couple lower grades than all your other ones. If you're the person on the right over here, this means you had a whole bunch of grades, maybe a bunch of P's, and then you ended up with one or two grades that were higher than what you were normally getting throughout the rest of the year. So your mean is going to be pulled higher than your median. So you're going to be one of these three situations. So what's a teacher to do? Now, I know what you're thinking. You're thinking, well, if I'm this student, I want you to give me the median. Or if I'm this student, I want you to give me the mean. Well, that doesn't really seem fair. Now, maybe a little bit, and to be honest, some teachers a lot of teachers, in fact, all the teachers probably, use their discretion at the end of the year to kind of decide, you're in the middle here somewhere, but I have to decide, are you really closer to the median or are you closer to the mean? It's just professionalism on our part about where you're at. So just keep in mind, this is where it kind of feels like, students always like to kind of say that teachers are guessing at their grades, and we're not guessing, but it feels that way because of this situation. We can't tell you, oh, we're using the median, and we can't tell you we're using the mean, because neither one of those makes sense for everybody. So we have to kind of look at both of those, and we have to kind of say, where are you in general? And then we have to use our teacher discretion to try to say, are you closer to the mean? Are you closer to the median? Now, what I've done is, and what the math department is mostly doing, is we're just calculating halfway in between these to give us a really good idea. And that average, like halfway in between the median and the mean, is what we're going to call the M&M. It's the mean and the median average, if you will, right? So we're calling that the M&M. So we're going to average those two out and kind of see if the middle is actually closer to the mean or if it's closer to the median, and try to figure out who you are as a student. Now, and again, it's just a calculation. It's a good baseline for teachers to use to get started, and then we'll use our teacher discretion after that. Because we know you as students. We see you in class every day or every other day. We get to know your work. We get to know how you've progressed over the years. And we're also looking at different things in the year. Like I know in Algebra 2, the first test is about functions, and that might not have as much weight as some of the other units possibly, right? So it just kind of depends on what's going on in each class. And again, that's why we can't say all classes are the same, because all classes are not the same. So we're not grading exactly the same in all classes. But this is a good idea of where teachers are looking. They're looking at what you're doing for the most part, and then we're adjusting that based on those little extra outlier grades, either a couple up or a couple down, right? And we're seeing if that really is enough to change your grade up or down. Okay, so here's a couple examples of that, of the M&M. So if you have 3 A's and a P for one student, and another student has 3 A's and an E, this is where it's difficult to kind of talk about, like, all right, what should I get? Should I get the A here, or should I get an AH? What should I get? Same thing here. Is it an A? Is it an AH? Is it even a P maybe? Right? And so it feels a little ambiguous, or at least it feels that way to students. But teachers are trying to really lock in and try to say, okay, what does this mean versus what does this mean? But the M&M will help. This will give us a good idea of where you're at to start. This person and this person are slightly different, but the way that, like you can see here, that they both have a mean and a median that are the same. You can see that. So the mean is AH and the median is A for both of them. Now I know the student wants us to just use the bigger one, right? But that's not really fair to this student if I give them the same grade that I gave this person, is it? So sometimes it makes sense to do that. But in this case, the grade that they actually have is closer to the median than it is the mean. But for this student, their kind of average, if you will, their M&M is closer to the mean than it is the median for them. So this is the grade that the teacher will start with, and then they'll use their teacher discretion from there. Okay, so there's also most recent and most consistent, and the M&M really does take a lot of that into consideration. I've done the statistics on it. I did a random sample of 157 students across 4 divisions over the summer and did an analysis on that. And it really is the consistent and most recent. This kind of takes that into account. It really does. The median is kind of your consistent part, and the mean will take into account your most recent, especially if they're higher. And of course the teacher will do that as well. And this is where this is more math specific. So, maybe if you're in a different department, maybe this is where you stop or whatever. But in the math department, we look at things a little different than other departments. So, like, we don't want confusion, right? So in the past, we've graded in our classrooms in the math department. Throughout each unit, we've graded, like activities and the homework, and we have quizzes that we do, and then we do a practice test, and we used to even have like a regular test, and then we did retesting, stuff like that. So within the unit, there's tons of feedback. There's tons of things that we're giving you feedback that you should be using to learn from. And then at the end of the unit, when you take your final test, those other grades that we could be collecting, and sometimes we do collect and put into EDSB, we don't have to use those as your actual grade because the test itself is the most recent. So maybe this particular unit is quadratics, where this over here is trigonometry. In the math department, it doesn't make any sense to replace your quadratic grade with a trigonometry understanding. So for us, most recent is within our units. Other departments are looking at it more over the whole year, and because you're doing something similar throughout the whole year, analyzing something or writing something or whatever, I don't know, not my department. But throughout the year, you're kind of practicing that same skill, that analysis skill or whatever you're doing. And so those teachers in those departments can look at the year-long thing as maybe more recent in those kind of terms, right? They might look at this overall versus this throughout the year, right? Everybody's using the kind of the whole year as a consistent though, right? Like, what are you doing throughout the whole year for the most part? And that's what we're going to start with, and that's what the median does, but we don't want to just ignore those other ones, so we add in the mean to get the M&M. Anyway, there's things you should know, like just be thinking about, have a conversation with your teacher. Everything should be, like the discussions you have should be about the proficiencies and your work. That's what it's really about, right? What did you do on your evaluation? And then leave it to the teacher and their professionalism And believe me, we're on your side. We want to give you the best grade we can, but still be professionals. So we're on your side. We're going to give you the best grade we can that you deserve. But keep the conversation around the proficiencies and let the teacher do the grades after that. All right. Don't come too late. If you're really concerned about your grades, then you should be concerned about that right now, right in the beginning, right when you're doing every unit and every paper and every homework that you're doing. You need to worry about that now and not be getting your energy up and getting your, maybe even sometimes your temper up at the end of the semester or the end of the year just because you're really worried about your grade. The worry should come in the work on a daily basis, when you're studying on a daily basis. So keep it there, keep your energy up there, and keep it directed in the right place and the conversations in the right place as well. Okay, let me know if you have any questions. You can always stop by and talk to me or talk to your teacher. Please do so.